We read a study by MIT, and Rio Tinto was putting it around, and it listed all the metals that might be impacted by electrification, and tin was actually ranked number one, and lithium was number two.
All right, everybody, welcome to the next Big Rush. I am here with CEO of TinOne, Chris Donaldson. Now, TinOne is a very interesting company, a first for me in tin. And I really want to tell you some of the characteristics of tin and how it really aligns with uranium if you're into that kind of thing. But I don't want to spoil it. So let's just dive right in. Welcome, Chris. How are you doing today?
Hey, thanks for having me, Fabi. No, I'm doing great.
Good, good, good. So let's start with the story of tin, because I think that tin is still very exotic when it comes to mining investing in general. You know, we talk to people who invest in junior mining, and it's usually the usual suspects when it comes to commodities, right? People like gold. Some people are absolutely crazy about silver and absolutely insane about uranium. A lot of people love copper. And also there's the oil guys, which are a separate category, right? And then we have the more exotic, titanium, tungsten, and we have tin. So please explain to me, why should people care about tin? What's the thesis? And, how can we make money from this?
Yeah, well, good questions. And you're not alone. You know, a lot of people don't really follow the tin story, but there are it's kind of a small basket of fanatics. If you're on Twitter, there's certainly some tin barons out there that really kind of are into the story. But tin is to your point. It's often considered the forgotten battery metal, and but it has an absolute use in everything to do with electrification. So tin itself is a very small market. I compare it actually to what's happened in the copper market. There's been underinvestment in the last decade or more, and lack of new projects coming online, and you're seeing increasing demand. So it's got this setup of copper with the potential torque of say lithium over the last couple of years, and really what the main use for tin is in solder. So that's everything that kind of binds electrical components together. So whether that be semiconductors or batteries, it has a component of tin in it, and of course that is only projected to increase here over the next decade. We got into the tin space about 5 years ago when absolutely nobody cared about tin, and some would argue not a lot of people care yet today. But I think that's going to change. I mean, we read a study put out by MIT, and Rio Tinto was putting it around, and it listed all the metals that might be impacted by electrification, and tin was actually ranked number one, and lithium was number two. So that's how we got into it, and we acquired a number of properties in Tasmania in Australia, and have been advancing them.
That is super interesting. So when we talk about tin, which at least we know how to spell, so that's a good start, right? So sometimes we get into things that we can barely spell to begin with. Don't get me started with the rare earths, right? Because that gets complicated. But so we're talking about tin. It's something that, in a similar way to copper, is used in a way that's kind of in almost anything, or in anything that is electronic. And so that probably goes hand in hand with, how well the economy is going, which is very similar to copper. What about some supply and demand imbalances? Are you able to speak about numbers? Is the demand increase something that we should be looking for, out 10, 15 years, or are we talking about, okay, it's increasing as we speak? And also a little bit about the supply. Where is this coming from? Is this something? Is tin common? Is it produced in many different countries? What does that look like?
Yeah, so good question. I mean, on the demand side, it's depending on what report you read, it's projected to increase 2 to 4% per year for the next decade and beyond. And so that in the long term is positive. Where it's interesting is actually on the supply side, and there's some long-term implications and some short-term ones, which could be quite dramatic. And I guess the first thing is, where does tin come from? So good question. There are no primary tin producers in North America. So for me, and I'm out of Vancouver. A lot of my meetings start with an education on tin because people don't follow the market, and they don't really understand it. However, in Europe and in Asia and in Australia, they're tin producers, and it's a little bit more common. 80% of the tin the world comes from either DRC, Myanmar, Indonesia, or China. And there's areas that you consider kind of dubious, and there's a whole narrative right now of getting supply from Western jurisdictions, and there are a lot of geopolitical factors that are coming into play right now, and the semiconductor kind of battle that's going on with the U.S. and China is something that's something to watch. And China, really controls the market in terms of supply. If they decide, we saw the tin price hit an all-time high last March. It got up to 50,000 a ton because China, which is a net importer, was their economy was going quite well. Then COVID hit and they flooded the market, and it crashed down to 17,000 a ton. It's now back around 28,000 a ton, which is kind of average and about the marginal, the incentive price for new projects. But what is interesting on the geopolitical side are two factors. One, Myanmar, which generally produces alluvial tin, is 95% of their tin goes to China. They just put a ban in starting in August in WAS, the WA, where they are suspending exploration and production of tin because they're running out of this alluvial tin, and it's also environmentally not terribly sound. So that represents 10%, almost 10% of world production. And to get that kind of supply shock, it'll be interesting to see what happens. And, we saw in January, February of this year, there's a mine called Mincer in South America, and it went offline for 2 or 3 months, and that caused the part of the reason that the price of tin went from 17 up to about 28,000, and that represented about 8% of world production. So you've got Myanmar now restricting supply, and then also what's happening in Indonesia. And Indonesia represents almost 25% of world production. They have indicated that they are going to suspend exports, similar to what they did with the nickel market a few years ago. And what they're hoping is to attract investment so they can get smelting plants and do it internally. And they represent an additional almost 25%. So there's potentially a supply disruption of 35% of the world tin market. And we'll see what happens. But that could cause the price of tin to absolutely spike. And the reality is, nobody really cares. The end user really doesn't care about the price of tin. If you look in your cell phone, you've got 40 cents or so of tin. So if that triples and you have $1.20, you're probably not going back to a landline, right?
Absolutely not. I can guarantee you that.
But as producers and explorers, that's quite significant. So this year could be very, very interesting. And tin, because it's such a small market, the price does swing quite wildly. So we're looking forward to seeing what happens over the next, say, 6 months or so. Some people have some pretty wild predictions that we're going to see $100, 100,000 tin. We saw 50 last March, so I think we could head back into that direction. And at that time, there was a lot of money coming into the space. The benefit of being a small market is, as a junior or a developer, there are just very, very few companies in which to invest. There are about 10 primary tin producers, and there are about 10 explorer developers. So if anybody wants to increase their exposure to tin, there's a small basket, and all boats tend to rise in those occasions. So that's something that's very, very interesting. I will say on the short term, though, on the demand side, the economy in demand, it's not looking great right now. We're seeing some weak data out of China, but the supply disruption more than makes up for that, and which is why you're seeing some strength in the tin price, and hopefully that continues.
So basically, the whole economic thesis of a weak China can hurt tin in the short to midterm, but long term, because the price hasn't been sustained over a certain level, let's call it 25 to 35,000, then it's unlikely that any projects are going to come into production. Not going to get financed. Sounds to me like it's sparsely produced and produced a very concentrated production in a few countries. And in those countries, they seem to be ever protective of the resources, to put it mildly and politically. It really does sound like another mineral, right? It sounds like uranium, where if you take the price of a commodity and it doubles and triples, it makes no difference to the end user, and the end user really doesn't have much of an alternative. It doesn't really make a difference, but for the producers, the explorers, and the developers like yourselves, it makes a whole lot of difference, and hopefully to investors that have chosen to go on that ride. Okay, so that is cool, but let's talk about TinOne. So I only know of Alphamin in this space, right? And they're, $1 to $2 billion market cap.
Yeah.
And it seems like there's not much else out there. Where are you guys at? And what's so interesting about what you're trying to build here?
Yeah, so I mean, we're very different from Alphamin, and they're an outlier, and it's in the DRC, it's underground, very, very high grade, and a very large resource they have there, and it gets the most attention, I would say, in the market. The other one is Metals X, which you may have heard of, and that's they own half of a mine called Renison, which is also in Tasmania. So, where our projects are. We have a basket of projects. The one that we're focused on the tin side is called Great Pyramid. Now, Great Pyramid is a project that stopped advancing in the 80s, like many, many projects around the world when the tin price collapsed. So we were able to pick it up for almost nothing in 5 years ago, and it had a historical resource on it that went from surface down to about 40 meters. So it potentially would be an open pit. It had a grade of about 0.2.
I can probably dig that deep myself with my bare hands. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
very shallow.
It's very shallow, and so it doesn't need the grade that say BC, which is or BISI, which is Alphamin has. So it's got a grade of about 0.2% tin, and the total contained tons is about 10,000 contained tons on the historical resource, and that's not really significant. So decent enough grade for an open pit, but not the size. So we've drilled that out last year. And we're right now in the process of updating that resource, and we should have that by the end of the summer. And hopefully that will then get us into a range which is, kind of puts us on the board. We look very closely to a project called Taronga, which was purchased by First Tin. It was an Australian project, open pit, very, very similar to Great Pyramid. It was purchased for $35 million. dollars a couple of years ago. So we're hoping to kind of get into the range of where they were in terms of size and hopefully a little bit better grade. And that should underpin the value of what we had. Our drill program was very successful. We had three goals: one, to prove out the historical resource; two, was to test at depth. So we drilled down to 200 plus meters, and three were to test the lateral extensions. And all three we achieved. It was actually quite successful. We had grade down to a couple hundred meters, which is good, but we were more interested in what was happening laterally in the extensions and so on, and hit on there. Our best hole, we hit 80 meters from surface at 0.5, so that's twice as deep and 2.5 times the grade that of the historical resource. So very interested to see where we land on this first kind of updated resource that we have, and we'll have that in the next couple months.
That's exciting. So I hear that you have some interesting lithium showings as well. Before we get into that, tell me about your team, because I'm not going to lie. When I saw Craig Perry as one of your advisors, I'm like, okay, these are the Eventa guys. There's something to this. You don't have any guarantees in this business, but mathematically, and this is just a tip for people who are watching this and maybe haven't lost as much money as I have investing in or speculating in junior miners. When you see people that have won in the past, you will detect a pattern that winners keep winning. Like this is so true in mining that it kind of sets the winners apart from the losers, many standard deviations apart. And so I saw a couple of names involved in your company that made me think, okay, these guys are not the usual clowns. So tell me about your management team and how you're set up to actually drive this forward.
Yeah. Okay. So we're backed by the Inventa Capital Group, which Craig Perry is a founder. Also, Michael Connert, who's on the board as well. Michael is the CEO of Vizsla Silver, which is quite a bit of success. And Craig, of course, has had a lot of success. He's a long time geologist with Rio Tinto, and then he was one of the founders of NextGen and ISO Energy. Was formerly the chair of Skeena Resources, and of course chair of Vizsla Silver, and all those companies were penny stocks at one point. None of these happened overnight, although Vizsla Silver was quite quick. But in several of the cases, they're billion plus market caps now, and I think Vizsla Silver's just under $500 million market cap. My background, I was with Western Copper as their head of corporate development for 7-8 years. One point, in 2015, we were 30 million market cap, and when I left, I think we were close to 300. So I guess the group has quite a bit of experience taking these, smaller projects, smaller companies, and growing them. And part of that is our ability to finance in tough times, and also know when to really push the gas and grow these and to acquire new projects and have the fortitude to do that. So yeah, I mean, we've got a very good group. It's certainly not a straight line, and it doesn't happen overnight. You got to get a little bit of luck in the market with timing and in terms of the commodities, rallying at as you're putting out results and all that kind of stuff. But you can't control that. The way you can control is to set yourself up for when those periods happen. And so so back to your comment that we have a little bit of a lithium problem, we'll call it as well, but it's not a problem. It's a happy surprise. There's two prongs to our company in TinOne. I mean, TinOne is focused on growing our resource at Great Pyramid. And for me, how I look at it is that is what's creating value. When we're putting dollars into drilling, we're finding we're finding tin and we're growing that resource. And when the time comes, we get it big enough, we'll be able to take it to the next step, and that just keeps adding value. And so that's our main focus. But then what happened is we have a second project called ABERFOYLE, which is about 20 kilometers up the road from Great Pyramid, and it's a past producing tin and tungsten district. Produced over 2 million tons of tin up until the mid 80s. And we went back and we're doing some sampling there, and there's some kind of what we call modern exploration, because it really didn't have any for 40 years. And in the process of doing that, we did some multi-element testing and found lithium. And this was a surprise to us. It wasn't something that we were, trying to pivot into. Everybody and their dogs trying to get into the lithium game, but it was something we couldn't ignore. So, we did backup, umpire analysis, and it came back positive. Some of the rock samples were over 1% lithium. We got the Mineral Resources Tasmania, which is the MRT, to help identify the rocks that we had, and they came out and were quite excited as well, and identified that we have these lithium mica rocks. We also engaged the geology university down there, the university with Codes, which is one of the premier geology programs in the world, and they've been helping us understand some of the structures. And just by luck, I guess, it turns out we have the dominant land position in northeast Tasmania of these lithium mica rocks. So early days, we're doing just rock sampling and soils, but everything's coming back, and it just we have a very large land package. The first area, which was it was called Dead Pig, of all things, it was named before I got Dead Pig and Guinea Pig. It was an area about 1 kilometer by 2 kilometers, and had quite a good imprint of tin, both in the soils and rock samples. We have now done further sampling, and in a different area about 8 kilometers away, and in an area we sampled about 1 kilometer by 2.5. And we also found levels of lithium, and we just released some results today in the soils as well. So, what we're trying to do right now is prove out that we may have something of potential scale. It's too early to say we've got a discovery. You really have to get drill holes to call it a discovery, but certainly we've got a lithium find, and it's quite exciting. The area that we're in, we were able to stake a couple of additional properties quickly. In the process of doing that, we're kind of finding out who's in our area. We found out that Fortescue has also staked properties. They staked their first bid in November, and about 2-3 weeks ago, they staked another bit right in our area. So it'll be interesting to see what their mandate is as well. But there's some other companies also now exploring for lithium in the area. So kind of an exciting time. It's definitely 2 prongs to the company, but it does give us some options, to finance, to potentially partner on either the tin side or the lithium side, or spin one out. I don't really know how that's going to look, but so when I was talking about the tin is really what we're growing the value on, this is kind of our lottery ticket. I mean, if we're able to prove out a district here, you couldn't be in a better place in the world to have a lithium find. We're in the #1 lithium producing country in the world. We're in a past producing mining district with ABERFOYLE, and past produced tin and tungsten. The infrastructure's all there. It's currently zoned for future commercial production. So you've already passed that hurdle. So it's quite exciting for us. Next steps are, we're not drilling yet. We're doing additional sampling, but we also went back and found some old core from the ABERFOYLE mine, and at that time they were targeting tin and tungsten. But we're sampling that and going to see if there's some lithium in, into the granites and so on, and at depth. So it's not a true drill hole for us, but it is a drill hole, and that will give us some idea if kind of depth and where the lithium lies. Is it just in the granite, or is it in some of the sediments as well? And what we're finding is it's not necessarily correlated with where there's tin as well. So yeah, pretty exciting. We'll have those results in the next couple of weeks as well.
That is fascinating. If you are, looking for your main mineral, all of a sudden you get hit with what's, basically the most popular mineral of the century, to go from something that was basically forgotten and being used as treatment for drug addicts to now being, the underlying metal for EV batteries and things of that nature. So fingers crossed for that. Right. So let's talk about financing. I know you guys just did a raise recently. How did that go? How much did you raise? And what can people expect moving forward?
Yeah, so we just did a small raise, and unfortunately, our share price over the last couple months has taken a bit of a hit. So didn't want to dilute too much, but raised about 800 grand. So we have a little over $1 million on hand, and which is enough to kind of get us through this next while, which is good. And then what to expect next? Yeah, I mean, we put out some news today. I mentioned that we'll have the results from the assaying of the core underneath ABERFOYLE, and I would expect that in a couple of weeks. And then the updated resource towards the end of the summer. So those are kind of the next steps. We'll then decide what to do with Great Pyramid. Part of the process of updating the resource is understanding the structure underneath, and then we'll see what results we have on the lithium side. My feeling is that we'll continue to sample and so forth, but I think we're pretty close to having identified some targets, and which point we may start drilling and hopefully turn this find into a discovery.
Awesome. Now, before I let you go, I must ask, and I am not a lithium expert by any standard, but you mentioned that you have lithium related to mica. What in the world does that mean, and how is it different to what we're used to seeing?
Yeah, and I'm not a lithium expert yet, although the last 4 months I'm getting up to speed here, because that wasn't something that we had gone into, but it's not as common as as with the lepidolite and in spodumene and so forth associated with that. But it is common in Europe, and it is common in China. In China, they actually produce lithium micas. What is unknown is just how effective they are at doing so. It's just hard to get that information out. What we do know, though, is we went and read 7 different feasibility studies of projects in Europe. 2 of them are being built, and to understand kind of what's an appropriate grade and so on. And the grades kind of range from 0.3 to 0.7% lithium in the micas there. I mean, and we're more than half of our samples were 0.5 and above, and reached up to 1.14%, I believe. So we're at least with samples and so on, we're in the game on that. There have been a lot of test circuits and so on that went into these in advance of these studies, and it gave a couple of companies enough confidence that they're building out their projects on it. So it's relatively new way of processing, but not one that people are shying away from. And I mean that's evidenced by presumably why you're seeing a Fortescue and others coming in and looking for lithium in our area.
I love seeing majors around, the areas where I invest, especially if they have big, deep pockets and want to JV. Sometimes stuff happens. I don't know. We'll see what we have here and see what kind of deals we can get and if it makes sense for the company. I'm really rooting for you guys. As you know, I am a shareholder and partner. These guys are sponsoring the channel, and I am very happy to hold. I always take stock in the companies that come onto the channel on a sponsored basis. And I am really rooting for both the tin part and the lithium part because I've been trying to get exposure to lithium. I almost felt like I missed it and didn't really know where to start because the names popping up were, too popular and too hot, and I didn't want to chase it. Then all of a sudden, I go for tin company, and who knows, maybe we have a lithium deposit here as an extra add-on. Chris, thank you so much. Where can people find out more about TinOne?
Yeah, of course, our website, TinOne.ca, but we're pretty active on Twitter as well. I believe look under TinOne for our handle on that. Sorry, I can't remember it offhand, but yeah, that's probably the best way to get some news. And then I'm happy to talk with anybody in person. You can email me, Chris@TinOne.ca, and we can set up a time to have a chat.
We absolutely love CEOs that are approachable and easy to get to. Thank you so much, Chris, and I'll chat to you soon, hopefully with some great news.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much. Take care. Have a great day.